to share with you guys, right?
Right.
All right, Annee, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I can. I'm Annee Martin. I'm 34 years old. I like to be able to speak up for myself, and I go to a self-advocacy group called Voices Speaking Out that meets every third Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. Right now, we are meeting at the Orgonia Road building. I love dogs, and I also love watching movies and being able to hang out with my family.
Awesome. What types of services have you had in the past prior to remote supports?
The past prior services that I've had to remote monitoring services was 24-hour care for an agency that was before I became drop-in services, where I was monitored with staff spending the night in my home and not very much alone time.
What types of services do you have now?
I have drop-in services and where I have remote monitoring, and I have 2 providers who come in and do their hours, and I have up to 40 hours a week of providing staffing services.
Okay. And this is a question for you and Katrina. How did the conversation about remote supports begin?
It began with me wanting to have drop-in services, and then where I was able to have remote monitoring services, needing that so that way I wouldn't be able to walk out of my home at night and to be able to not have as much staffing hours at night.
Can I add to it? We talked about this on the way here, just to make sure Annie's okay with sharing, since it's about her life.
Yeah.
Annie had 24/7 staffing, and there were some personality clashes, I think, between Annie and some of her staff. And those personality clashes may have triggered some anxiety for Annie, and there were times that she would walk out of her apartment. It could have been late at night, made some, kind of statements that scared us for her safety. So we started talking and realized that a lot of the issue was indeed perhaps having staff there all the time, because I wouldn't want that. So I think it was kind of stressful for Annie. So to allow her the independence to manage to have remote supports in place, to still have them available if she needed them, but not have people there intruding on her privacy 24 hours a day. So we saw a lot of what we would call elopement when she had 24/7 staff, a lot of emergency room visits, right? And when she got remote supports in place, I know it's a question later on, but it was a tough battle. I think the team was a little worried about the what if scenarios, because we're taking staff away, but it proved to be pretty amazing, because it allowed her to be able to manage her emotions on her own, but also gave her the support that she needed if she absolutely had to, and she didn't have to leave her own house to get away from people who were on her nerves, basically, right? Good? Okay.
Great. Annee, how did you feel about remote supports in the very beginning?
I thought it was okay in the beginning and thought it would be good for me to have some independency.
What kind of remote supports do you have?
I have remote monitoring services with THS. I have sensors, a smoke detector that lets them know when there's smoke and goes straight to the office. I also have a carbon monoxide detector that goes straight to the office. I also have a sensor above my doors that let them know if I go out my house or at a certain time, and also a sensor in my bedroom that lets them know how many hours I've slept in bed. And I also have, and my hours are from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and a two-way sensor that I can talk to them if I need them.
Wow.
I know at the beginning, when we talked about what supports were available, because Annie was the first person in Warren County to get remote monitoring, so it was a learning experience to say the least, and THS was wonderful walking us through that process. But initially, we were gonna get 3 cameras, right? One at the front door, one at the back door, one in the living room pointing into the kitchen, these sensors that she talked about. So that initial conversation was very different than what she actually has now, because again, she was very successful and a lot happier with less involvement, I guess you could say.
How long have you had remote supports?
2.5 years.
Wow. How do you feel about remote supports now that they've been in place?
I really feel now that they are in place, I can do away with them once I don't have any more health concerns.
All right. Katrina, how did you go about finding a company to work with?
I was not the SSA, I'm a behavior specialist, so, but again, everything with Annee is a team effort. So at the time, like I said, she was the first person in Warren County, and the provider search was done, and we were able to meet with THS. I know I have another individual who also uses THS, and so going to the office to meet with them, explain what services we were hoping, what challenges we might face, and they were able to kind of come back to us with, we have this to address that concern, and we have this, like they just have a plethora of options. So we ended up going with THS back then.
And how has the communication been with the team?
It has been very great because I can, if I have a concern or a problem, I can always go to my team and they can always even go to them, like the last time they didn't show up to put in the new stuff, I even went to my guardian and she called them and they came right out.
Wow. Katrina, in your opinion, how have things been going for Annee?
Amazing. That's the best I can say. When I started working with Annee, it was about 5 or 6 years ago, right? I want to say. And she's a completely different person. We meet once a month because for a time, we're meeting weekly. There were some pretty intensive needs and concerns, and that was back when we had remote monitoring implemented. And now we meet once a month, not because there's concerns, but just because we like to hang out with Annee. She actually runs all her meetings, literally. She has her phone. She has an agenda, right, Ellen?
Right.
And she brings a speaker, and she has she's so tech savvy again. She'll play an inspirational song for us. And then she goes around and asks the team, like for an example, what motivates you? Or I'm trying to think of what your last homework was for your team. And she goes through her agenda on her phone, don't you? And as she
Yes.
says, I just take the minutes, that's all I do. And she runs her meeting and she tells us what she wants, and it's amazing. So it's been really cool to see her grow but improve. She's facing some medical issues now that have been almost unbelievable, that they just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming, and she has faced those with grace, patience. I don't think I could have been so happy because she maintains this positive outlook even when things are going awful. So I would say compared to 6 years ago, she is literally a completely different person. Are you happier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you sure seem like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Annee, how do the remote supports help you?
They help me by making sure I maintain not going outside my house after 10 o'clock, and make sure I don't do things I shouldn't do, and make sure that I'm safe in my home, and make sure that I'm living a good, happy life.
And you're allowed to go outside, but they check in at 10.
Yeah, they
to
check
make
it.
sure.
And then if I were to go outside after 10, they call me and I go, I was just out with my staff, I'm just coming back in, you know.
Or taking the trash out,
Or
or
taking
mom
the-
just came over.
Yeah, yeah. Like the other night, my mom spent the night and she accidentally went out, but they never did call. And I'm like, they're gonna call mom, and I'm like, and they never did. Because my mom spent the night and I was like, she just took something out, and I thought they were gonna call, but they never did.
And for you and Katrina, if there was someone who wanted to try remote supports, what do you recommend they start?
You want me to do that one?
You go first and then I'll go.
I would say, I have another individual on my caseload who just started with remote supports as well, in addition to drop-in services like Annee. But similar to Annee, when we first had the discussion, it was gonna be all these things in her place, all these video cameras, and all these things, because I know there's so much available out there, which is great, but when we actually thought about it and saw how successful she was, we didn't need all of that. The other individual I have has a video camera, has the tablet that she uses quite frequently, a lot of different supports in place. So I would say just sitting down with the individual and asking what they want, that's gonna help them feel safe and secure in their own home. I think a lot of times we have so many people with 24/7 supports that may not be necessary, and yeah, they may be there because they're a friend or they're somebody to hang out with, but just making sure what's in place or what do you want in place to help you feel safe. Because the reality is, I know it sounds terrible, but if staff are actually a trigger for stress, if there's a way to minimize that and allow the independence and kind of walk in the journey with our people, I think that's even better. So I would say just sitting down with the person and asking what they need to feel safe, and then getting input from the rest of the team as well.
If there was somebody wanting to try remote monitoring services, I would recommend using THS, and I would recommend someone getting remote monitoring services if they were first moving out on their own and they were scared. I would recommend that for them to try and see, so they could get more independency in their home.
I want to add something too, because I mentioned earlier that some of the team maybe wasn't on board initially. Can I share about your guardianship a little bit? Because Mom was guardian back in the day when we had this discussion, and I know Mom was pretty worried about decreasing her services because Annie had so 24/7, and so as a mom she was very protective of her daughter, and she was worried that if we took away services, what if she needs them? It was that whole what if situation and all these scenarios. What do we do if we need something else in place? And assuring the team that if that were necessary, we would have that discussion and increase the supports, back to where we can keep her safe. But it turned out to be the opposite. So it was an ongoing challenge, I would say, to get everybody on board. And I think for Annie too, there might have been a little fear, because I know you enjoy being around people and taking away some of that staff. But now she's got some pretty awesome staff now, and between that and her team and the remote services, she's good to go. But I would say it wasn't really a welcomed thing, and I think because it's new to our county.
And a cool new guardian.
Since then she got a new guardian.
Yeah.
That was another big process. That allows Mom to be Mom, right?
Yep.
So it's been good. And Annie's on the way to being her own guardian.
Yep.
That's another big thing too that's been happening. So.
Any final words?
Nope. I just like THS, and they're really good at remote monitoring services. I recommend if you have somebody that needs remote monitoring services, I would use THS.
Nice little plug, THS.
So we have a question?
Annie, do you live by yourself or do you have roommates?
I live by myself. I do not have roommates, but on the roommate match committee, but I just live by myself.
You used to have roommates.
I did. I used to have a roommate, but didn't work out.
So if you did have roommates, would they all need to use billing for remote monitoring? Like how would that work if you had 2 or 3 people?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean,
I have 2 people. I don't know if we have more than 2 in our county. The 2 that I have, I know they both live on their own.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but he has a handout.
So is there an agency in place where it's like 8, 12, 10 hours a day, or just she's constantly by herself with remote monitoring? How's that work?
She has 40 hours.
40 hours a week of staffing, and then from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I have remote monitoring.
So she has a pretty high number of HPC services. She has a lot of medical needs, a lot of medical appointments, but she also has a lot of alone time as well. So she's able to participate and go on trips with Miss Ellen, with the advocacy group. So a lot of that I think is in place because of the medical needs.
How does that funding work for that? Is the agency paying for that, or is the city paying for that?
Paying for the remote monitoring?
Her waiver.
Her waiver.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's her residential
what it is THS has backup support.
That was a huge discussion because we're going from 24/7 services for Annie, and one of the biggest challenges was the ER visits, to be honest. And so when we were revising the ISP and trying to spell out those services, the backup or substitute coverage was an issue. So what if she reaches out to THS at 11:30 p.m., THS contacts the 911, she goes to the hospital, she's there till 4 a.m., who comes to get her? Because it's not THS. Mom didn't want to be responsible for driving from Mason to come get her from the hospital. So that was a very real discussion with the team that if she goes to the hospital, she's assessed by a licensed clinician, obviously at the emergency room. If the licensed clinician felt she was not a risk to herself or others, or in any medical emergency, she was responsible for getting herself home
Yes.
because she was safe and healthy. So,
It still is an ongoing issue, but,
no, it's not. When was the last time you went to the ER?
no, well, we're talking about it now.
Well, we are for your plan.
For my
Your
plan.
annual plan
My
is
annual
coming
plan,
up.
yeah.
And we talked about the substitute coverage, and since we're not seeing the ER visits like we
As
were
much,
seeing.
but no, we're just talking about somebody getting me home.
Yep.
We're talking about.
Has that happened? Have you put all that plan into place where you've gone to the ER at night and you've had to get yourself home?
I've had before, yeah.
Years
Years
probably
ago.
2.5 years
Two
ago
and
when
a
it
half
first
years.
was implemented.
What do you just call Uber? How do you get home?
I've called Uber before and other places like that before. My dad's done it once. But
Thanks, Dad.
thanks, Dad, yeah.
But can I brag real quick?
Yeah.
So when I first started working with Annie 5 or 6 years ago, she had, what was the number? 13, I think, ER visits
Yeah.
/ admissions.
But not now.
Since I've worked with her, she's had 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I
That's what
really
the-
am,
It was medical.
and that was medical. Well, you had 1 at Beckett.
Yeah.
But, to go from 13 in like less than a year. So I really do think that the 24/7 staff was almost too much, and I think it was kind of triggering some of her anxiety. And she wanted to get out of that situation and did whatever she could to do that. So I do believe that a large part of her success is because of remote monitoring and her hard work, for sure.
And my new staffing that I have.
Yeah, you get along great with your
Yeah.
staff.
So did I hear, so you have staffing during the day and then at night, just at night you use remote
Yeah.
monitoring?
10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
So would you ever, increase the remote monitoring so you wouldn't have staff there so much during the day?
No. No.
Because she likes to have staff still.
I do.
for- yeah. Like I said, she's a very social person, so we talked about that on the way here. But I don't think she'd ever want to be completely without
No,
staff.
because I have for my medical appointments and stuff.
Okay.
Have y'all tried non-medical transportation when she's at the hospital and doesn't have a ride home or something like that?
No.
Carry on.
That might
I've
be-
tried Cargo, yeah.
Yeah, that might be something we might wanna look into.
We have, but the challenge is a lot of times it's in the middle of the night when there was overnight staff, and there wasn't always people willing or able to come pick her up. I know it sounds so mean that we were like, hey, you can find your own way home, but honestly, it helped. Individualized, person-centered, right?
And I don't have that many hospital visits now.
No, you don't.
No.
Not at all.
Any more questions?
Do you feel like this could be implemented with other people similar to you that are overstaffed, and this is like a step to get them more independent, to the point where they could call their own Uber and take care of themselves?
Yes, I think they could benefit on that because it could be more like if you want to be more independent, yes.
Wholeheartedly, yes. Like, I have another, and I don't want to share too much about that individual, but it's been wonderful. This particular individual, again, has some mental health issues that I have on my caseload, and it's always been 24/7, 24/7, 24/7. A lot of self-injurious behaviors, And we realized that when you allow more freedom and ability to have a voice and control in a situation, kind of minimize a lot of that. So I think the remote supports for that particular person, which are different than what Annee has. This person has a video camera, has the tablet, two-way communication also, and then medication, like a locked medi set. So she went from a 24/7 home staffed by our local mental health agency to living in her own apartment. She was given 30 days for somewhere to live. And in the past, the 24/7 HPC services just wasn't beneficial for her. So she moved out and now has remote supports and drop-in. And again, I think it's been very successful for her as well. So a lot of people that on paper may be like, oh my gosh, you know, like, but it's been awesome. Anything else?
I think it's awesome to have remote monitoring services because then you become more independent.
Yep.
And you just think one day, well, maybe it's not gonna be for me, but it will be.
Well, I think when you have staff too, a lot of it is maybe, I think the remote monitoring has allowed you to realize that your potential, that you're capable of doing a lot more that staff would typically step right in and do for her. Annee doesn't like things done for her. She likes to do things on her own, so I think that's been a key
And then
part.
you can come to the advocacy group for voices speaking out and then come learn how to speak up for yourself.
She has no problem doing that.
Throw that in.
Another
Good
plug for
advocacy.
Annee. She is not getting paid for this.
Alright, so I missed a little bit. If you already touched on this, let me know. So you as a team, how did you start the research process of finding companies, and how did that process work for you all as a team?
If my memory serves me correctly from 2.5 years ago, remote monitoring was not a discussion that was really had in this county at least. So we did a provider search, if I'm not mistaken, and THS responded and we met with them and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of response because I don't think it was really the thing to do back then. And it still isn't, to be honest. That's why we're here, right?
I was the first one in Warren County, that's all I know.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, so remote monitoring is being pushed countywide but statewide. We're gonna hear about that later. But Ellen, how in advocacy are you all discussing remote supports and things like that, or that's not really something?
That's off the paper.
You know, but in our advocacy group, we do discuss things that would make them more independent, because many of them are in situations where they have that 24-hour staffing, and you know, just listening to them is so frustrating, because when staff come into someone's home, when they leave, they're taking a piece of their personal life. And to have someone there all the time, you know, so we have talked about remote monitoring, and Annee was one with me that we went to a Project STIR meeting in Columbus, and they had a speaker on technology, and they showed us on the map with remote monitoring up north, like everything that was dark blue were individuals that's utilizing remote monitoring, and it was like all dark blue up in the north. But then down here, it was like you see a dot, and you see a dot here. So I think that, I think it's gonna start moving down, because there are some things that, you know, like some of our folks, like we removed the word disability out of our advocacy group. Our new word is what? People with, not disabilities, but abilities.
Ability, that's right.
Yes, we're not focusing, because, you know, we're finding that there are things that they can just do on their own, but they're so used to having that person right there, you know, but then if you kind of back up a little bit, they want to be independent, and they're able to be independent. So that's what I'm doing. I'm pushing, sorry, provider staff, but I'm pushing, because it just gives them independence that they should have. So, yeah.
So 5 years ago, would you ever see yourself with just drop-in
No.
and remote supports?
No.
Based on when I got the referral, I would have, I mean, even, I hate to say that, and I'm usually one to say all, you know, positive, but to see her now, it's really been remarkable.
What does your average day look like, Annie? When you're not going to the ER?
My average day looks like doing house chores around the house, and sometimes going to the grocery store, and then the evenings I hang out with my other provider. We go out to eat, and we go different places and hang out with their family if their family will allow me to hang out with them.
And she's had a lot of medical, what was your day like 2 months ago? What did your day look like?
Going to hyperbaric chamber
Every day?
every day,
And then follow-up appointments?
follow-up appointments and stuff like that.
Multiple times a week?
But now it's better, and I can watch my Fire Stick TV now, which I like.
And comedies,
And comedies.
Bad Grandpa, or whatever. What's your
Yeah.
favorite movie?
Friday. My favorite movie is Friday. No, it's because I call you Felicia.
And I am proud to be Felicia. Just saying. We all have nicknames on our team.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Elwoods.
I knew you were gonna put that in there. So.
What level of supervision is remote monitoring considered? Is that like?
Jeez, I wish the SSA was here.
I just don't know how that's written into the plan. Is that something? Is that like? Do you know if that's visual or is that its own category?
Hers is not visual because she doesn't have the cameras, and on the other person it isn't either, because the cameras, in my understanding, would be rarely in somebody's bedroom. Like we won't put that for somebody else because that's privacy, but in the common area. So I'm not sure. I do know in Annie's plan, the supervision page is quite lengthy and detailed because we do have to break it down for level of supervision for the HPZ provider, for the backup coverage, that kind of stuff. So I can get back to you on that.
They just added remote supports into the pool, so it's its own.
It's its own category. Okay, that's kind of what I thought. So I was like, you're not
It's
technically
under
there.
HPC, it's its own thing.
Okay,
So, according to the state.
gotcha.
Because I just know on that page, we highlight the crap out of remote monitoring. You know what I mean? Like from these hours to these hours, so it's very much broken down, to make it clear for the providers too, the drop-in services.
I was just curious about the overlap of services. Assuming that an HPC is about to leave and emergency happens, and remote services is also activated at the same time. Where do you, I don't know whether it's a good question for you or for THS, but where do you stop the HPC services and
When
the
does remote monitoring
services
take
to
over?
be- Yeah, versus billing.
Well, in Annie's situation, we've never had that where there was a need for, because her providers work with her. I mean, they have their hours per week, obviously, so they set up their schedule with Annie depending on what she wants to do or what she needs them for. So I don't think there's ever been that issue with her. I know another individual who has drop-in services, there have been issues that the provider will leave, and within a half an hour, the individual's reaching out to remote monitoring for whatever reason. And that's just how it is. And then they let us know that she reached out to us and she ended up going to the ER, or whatever the situation is. So as far as billing, that provider I've never seen that, and I'm sure it would happen at some point in time, but when the person utilizes remote monitoring, it would be when their provider's not there. That's all I've ever seen. Does that help? Does that make sense? I'm making sure I'm answering.
I guess I'm looking at emergency situations where it's unavoidable. It happens right at the timeline when the HPC is not gone yet, but the remote services is also kicking in at
Okay.
that time mark.
That's a good question. I've never, with the two individuals that have it, I've never seen that situation come up. But I would think, just like in any other situation, if they're getting ready to leave and it's an emergency, they would stay to do what they need to do. Because remote monitoring is they're not gonna come out in person. You know what I mean, at least in their situation. Or if what they can do is reach out and call 911 on behalf of the individual, depending what the situation is. So we've been lucky to not have that happen.
I think what she's saying is, so the building is not 24 hours for the remote service. That's not being built, that's only being built when a provider's not there, basically. Or just. when
I
she's
know
using
for
it.
Annie, hers is only approved from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So that would be under remote monitoring. And I apologize because I don't do a lot with billing, so those might be questions for later for the providers themselves. I don't know. I apologize for that.
It seems to me, though, to identify some of these questions, Annie has alone time, 40 hours a week, does not cover, there's probably gaps in the evening, there's gaps on the weekend. She also has alone time, and the alone time is also something if she needs, just like anybody, an emergency happens, she knows how to call 911 or anything else. So she's not on 24/7 where it's a person, now it's the machine, it's a person, it's a machine. She's got level of independence beyond that.
Yep, I do.
And that was part of the discussion, and like I said, when somebody wants to start having that very real discussion of what services does the person want to feel safe, but also input from the team, we wholeheartedly trust Annie to know. We know she can call 911 if she needs to. Not to be mean, but like that was a problem, so it's like she's going to know how to do that. So we weren't worried about that so much, but just making sure there was somebody to contact. Annie's got a fabulous choice of unpaid supports too. You got a great family who live close that she can reach out. She spends a lot of time with them, nieces and nephews, so she's got a busy, busy life.
Yeah.
So.
So if you have a staff that has like medication in the morning, afternoon, and nighttime, drop-in service will come during those time only?
How does that work for you?
I'm self-med right now, but like if I wasn't self-med, when I wasn't self-med, I had people coming over and giving me medicine, like providers.
Yeah, because there were times that she wasn't able. I know the other individual that we have with remote supports has medication 4 times a day, if I'm not mistaken. In that situation, she has, we have a pretty fancy medi set for her that will go off, the alarm starts sounding, because you know you have that hour window to administer the medication, and that alarm will go off. And if she doesn't take it in a lot of time, then THS contacts her to ask why she hasn't taken it, so it's a way they monitor that as well. The only challenge for that has been this other person likes to go out and do things too. So if she has drop-in services that day and they're going to the movies and they're not gonna be home till 9:30, it takes a lot of planning and team communication to let THS know, like, hey, she's not gonna be there till this time, you know, we have to get the medication unlocked to provide to her, you know, so it does take a lot of that little stuff for days like that when she's not at home.
Yeah.
But when she is there, THS does monitor all the medication.
So THS can see the medication, right?
They have the two-way video there in the common area, and then she has the locked medi set that will alarm and only open at certain times. And it's only one dosing thing will open at a time. So there's no danger of her taking too many medication or the wrong medication. It's a pretty fancy piece of technology.
It is, because I have the same thing, and my staff help me fill my pill minder, and I have a Mediset thing, and it goes off, and if you don't get it in time, it just keeps going off.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying.
It is pretty annoying.
So the MARS is not required at that point anymore?
I'm sorry, the what?
The MARS, the documentation for.
You signed your MAR?
My staff do.
Okay, so when they help you do it, but
Yeah.
then, the other individual signs off on her own.
Okay.
I don't have to.
We explain what that is.
The MAR,
Yeah.
medication administration record. Basically, if staff are responsible for assisting somebody with medication, when they provide the medication, they have to initial on a form to make sure the person's getting the meds as prescribed. But if an assessment was done to say this person can self-administer, then she would sign off on that.
Yeah.
And Darlene, our nurse, always does our assessments in these situations too, to make sure that we're addressing any concerns in that nature.
Have you ever spent the night somewhere different and What happens with your remote monitoring then?
I have spent the night somewhere different, then you're supposed to call THS and tell them you're spending the night somewhere different and let them know.
Okay, cause she's gone on vacations
Yep.
and trips, to LA.
Yep, that's when you're supposed to let them know.
And I just wanna throw in, with Annee and the other individual, as we start hearing more and more and individuals start using the remote monitoring, it's scary at first, like Katrina said, just like, when transportation went, when they had to start using public transportation, when our workshop went private. Those are fears that come upon us, because we're so used to having all the staff and all these things in place. So I think what really aided with Annee and her parents was the fact that Annee has a strong team. And we get together, there's been times we got together every week, Katrina calls the shots, or we get together
And
every
Annee
2
calls the
weeks.
shots. Make me sound bossy.
But Katrina's just an awesome person, but just to have that strong team support, I think when Annee started using remote monitoring, I think some of the relaxation came knowing that she has this team that's ready to step in, so she didn't go into it by herself. The strong team is here. And I mean, we talk about everything to support Annee. And I think as we go forth, other individuals is going to benefit from remote monitoring, but I think the team is going to play an intricate part with not only the individual, but with the parents.
Cause we did, I mean, when you first got remote monitoring, we met weekly for over a year, I think. And it was as many people from the team, and it was just the way, cause again, it was a learning experience to say, what are we missing? Like, are we doing all we can? Annee, what do you need from us? But it was also, she knew that, cause that fear for her and for her parents was that we're taking away services. She's gonna, it wasn't comfortable, but then we were there. I forget when your meetings used to be, cause I know our other person, every Wednesday morning, we're there.
Fridays.
But it was on Fridays at 11 o'clock. Every Friday at 11 o'clock, Annee knew that we were all gonna be in that room waiting to talk to her, see what else we needed, and her parents too. So I agree that I think it wasn't just, here you go, you're losing all your staff, you got a camera now, good luck. It wasn't that, it was like, we're in this with you.
And then when I first had THS, I'd be opening my doors and just throw trash out and I'd forget that they were there. It's like, you forget that THS is there.
And you used to complain about the sensor by your bed. Can I just move the sensor? Because it was going off all the time. So you would bump it or something.
Yeah.
It was just little things like
Like
that.
the thing that would, the emergency button. And then I always would forget, and he just called me at 10 o'clock at night, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, just throwing my trash out. I'm like, throwing my trash out, forget that they were there.
So then we had our weekly meeting and she brought it up because she wrote her own agenda and we were like, can't you just move the sensor? Or, let THS know. And I think THS then got to know Annie's kind of routine and her schedule to know.
Yeah.
So.
And now I just don't go throw my trash out after 10 o'clock. I know, don't do that.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we want to thank Katrina and Annee for participating today.
Thanks, Ellen.